Sathanavya, Sutaram 7, Atmadarshana, Adhikarana 1 and 2. Sat cannot know and Asat cannot exist. If everything is Sat, then no conscious knowledge of anything can arise. If you say that Sat becomes the knower by union with Asat, its products, the organs, no, Asat cannot appear in the presence of Sat, as no darkness can subsist in the presence of light. If you say that Asat itself is the knower, no, it cannot be, as it cannot subsist in the presence of the Sat, and as it is merely the instrument of knowledge of another. Adhikaranam 3. The knower of both is the soul. The knower who knows both Sat and Asat is the Atma, soul. It is neither Sat nor Asat, it is eternal and Satasat. When in conjunction with them, it does not show itself as they do, but is one with them. It appears in them as fragrance in a flower. As Satasat, it is united to both and in union with each. It identifies itself with each so thoroughly that it becomes each. This is a peculiar characteristic of the soul, which Professor Drummond calls the law of assimilation. Impurities attach to soul and not to God. Asat and Ajnana cannot attach themselves to the Sat and Jnanasvarupi and Jyoti, God. All impurities are attached to the soul. The Vedas declare that the souls and Asat exist even eternally with God, as in the substance of the sea and water and salt. The analogy of the sea is particularly noteworthy. There is a world of difference between the way this analogy is used by Vedantis and the way it is explained by Siddhantis. The Purvapaksha view is thus set forth by a learned Swami. There is but one Atman, one self, eternally pure, unchangeable, unchanged, and all these various changes are but appearances in that one self. Upon it name and form have painted all these streams. It is the form that made the wave different from the sea. Suppose the wave subsides, will the form remain? No, it will vanish. The existence of the wave was entirely dependent upon the sea, but the existence of the sea was not at all dependent upon the wave. The form remains so long as the wave remains, but as soon as the wave leaves, it vanishes, it cannot remain. This name and form is what is called Maya. It is this Maya that is making individuals, making one appear different from the other, yet it has no existence. Maya cannot be said to exist. Form cannot exist because it depends upon another's existence. It cannot be said to non-exist, seeing that it makes all this difference. According to the Advaita philosophy, then, this Maya, or ignorance, name and form, or, as it has been called in Europe, time, space, and causality, is out of this one infinite existence, showing us the manifoldness of the universe. In substance, this universe is one. So according to this Swami, the one infinite existence is God, and its form is Maya, and its name ignorance. God is the sea, and the multiformed waves Maya. The one is unchanged and unchangeable, and yet this changes into multiform waves, which are but appearances. But it is on account of these changes and appearances, dualistic knowledge and ignorances, and sorrow and samsara results. And the one infinite existence, which is eternally pure, becomes finite and impure. It is on account of these appearances God becomes a man, a dog, a worm, and but for these appearances God would remain a god. What converts indeed a divinity into a brute cannot be unreal and non-existent, and of no moment as denoted by the use of the word but in the sentences quoted above. If these changes and appearances are vital, how can the one infinite existence be called unchanged and unchangeable too? And what constitutes the real difference between changeable and unchangeable? The very first definitions which the beginner in physical science meets with are about stable and unstable equilibriums in nature. The stable is that which remains unaffected and without change of form by the surrounding forces of nature. Unstable is easily affected by those very same forces, and their forms are easily changed. And as examples are given, solids for the stable, and liquids and gases for the unstable. And what is here called the unchanged and unchangeable? It is the sea water, which physicists expressly call unstable and unchangeable, and yet there is no congruity in the comparison and no contradiction in terms. It is the seawater that is called here unchangeable and unchanged, which is ever the sport of the elements, and the sun and the moon, which changes with each gust of the wind, and with each phase of the sun and the moon. This ever-changing and tempest-tossed and discolored waters of the deep, are they to be compared with the unchangeable Infinite One? Who has not read of the horrors of a howling sea, if one has not actually witnessed it? And that true poet of nature makes his Miranda truly wish. Poor souls, they perished. Had I been any god of power, I would have sunk the sea within the earth. So we would have wished, too, there was no sea and no God, if all our sufferings and sorrows, poverty and misery, hatred, and all the evils of our samsara sagara and ignorance were but appearances of this one God. And then again, on the analogy as explained above, what little of power and self-dependence, svatantram, is left to this one infinite existence. Is it self-luminous and self-dependent, or is it the sport of every chance? The sea that is played on by every wind and tide cannot be said to have any power and independence, much less this God who is played on by Maya and ignorance. Our Swami eloquently asks, suppose the wave subsides, will the form remain? But suppose we ask, when will the wave subside? What answer will our Swami return to this question? The waves will subside when the winds subside. When will the winds subside? Echo answers when? When will Maya and Avidya leave us? When our karma ceases? Echo answers when? The inherent fallacy in the use of this analogy as above stated is in taking the large body of seawater as representing God. Though popular use justifies us in taking the sea space and everything contained in it as the sea, yet the true sense of the sea is the sea space, containing water and everything else, the all-container, the formless, changeless, and unchanging and infinite space. In this view, how beautiful is St. Makandar's simile as explained by Kanadaya Valalar, and how full of meaning. The sea is Shivam, water is the soul, salt is Anavamala, avidya is ignorance, karma is the wind, the feelings of I and mind, pashu, bodha, and pashu jnana are the waves. The first cause of all, in accordance with your karma, ever makes you revolve, as does a top, in various births, in conjunction with your external and internal senses. In this view, God's supreme omnipresence and immanence in nature is positively brought out, and his supreme self-dependence and svatantratvam is not destroyed, while the soul is not left without freedom or will, and without means and hopes of salvation. By effort and practice, he can put down his pasubodha or jnana and become balanced in good and bad acts, karma, submitting himself to the will of the Lord when he can reach the condition of perfect calm, nirvana, literally non-flowing as water or air. What for? To reflect the glory and light of the Supreme Lord, and to lose himself in the glory and light. Look at the incomparable words of Saint Tirumolar. O ye fools who attempt to speak of the unspeakable, can you reach the limits of the limitless sea? As the waveless stilled water of the deep, if you reach peace of mind, then surely will the Lord with braided hair appear to you in faultless glory. Hence God is Svatantra and soul is Asvatantra. The soul is called qualified Chit and Sat as it knows when taught and is eternal. God is eternally pure and free and intelligent, and by his grace he frees the souls of their impurities. Suttaram 8. Adinakaram 1. The way jnana is imparted to the soul. Just as the king's son brought up among savages did not know his father till his true father came, and separating him from his wild associates acknowledged him as his own, and had him respected even as himself, so also does our Lord, appearing as the gracious Guru, separate the sorrowing soul, which is caught among the savages of the five senses, and is unable to know his own greatness or that of his friend from its sensory environments, and purifying it of its dross and transforming it even into his own glory, places it under his flowery foot. How different souls are shown grace. The souls are divided into three classes, namely Vijnana Kalar, Pralaya Kalar, and Sakalar. They have respectively attached to them Anavamala, Anavamala and Karmamala, and Anavamala and Mayamala. To the first two classes of souls, the Supreme with limitless grace shows himself in his Niradhara condition, and removes their mala by the two kinds of his Shaktinipada called Tivara and Tivaratara. To the Sakalars, he shows himself in the form of the Guru when their mala had become balanced, and removes their sins by means of the four kinds of Shaktinipada. Sakalas can also become Vijnanakalars and Pralayakalars by burning up their guna body, formed of Prakriti, matter, by the strength of their tapas and yoga. To become Vijnanakalars, they have also to burn up karma. The Vijnanakalars are of various grades, called Pakavar, fully matured, and Apakavar, not fully matured. The latter divide themselves into Uttama, Madhyama, and Adama, and Vijnana Kala Kevalas. The Uttamas are the Anusadashivas and have material bodies formed of Sadakya Tattva. The Madhyamas are the Ashtavidyasvaras and dwell in Ishvara Tattva. The Adamas are the Mahamantras who dwell in Sudavidya Tattva. Vijnanakala Kevalas dwell below this tattva and above Asudamaya. The Anusadashivas and Vidyasvaras become lords of creation, etc. also. The Pralayakalas dwell in the regions of the Kalati Tattvas and own an eightfold body, Purishaktaka, and are divided into three classes. The Sakalars dwell in the regions below Mulaprakriti and comprise all living beings, men, Ashuras, and Devas, up to Vishnu, and are of three classes. Shaktinipada is the descending of God's grace, his Chit Shakti, or divine light. As this light enters more and more into the soul by the rubbing off of the dirt and uneven edges, mala, which surround the pure crystal soul, the more and more does it shine, when finally it is indistinguishably covered up and clothed by the divine light, and becomes one with it. The four kinds are Manda, Vidyashakti, Mandatara, Tivara, and Tivaratara. These four are presided over respectively by Nivriti Shakti, Pratishta Shakti, and Shanti Shakti. See Table of Tattvas and the Tamil commentaries for more detailed information regarding the different classes of souls. Different ways by which the Acharya removes sin are Nayana Diksha by the eye, Sparsa Diksha by identifying himself with the Chela, Shastra Diksha by imparting instruction, Yoga Diksha by entering the Chela's soul by yoga. The forms of Hotri Diksha, sacrificial Diksha, are also various, and they are divided into Jnana and Kriya Dikshas. Jnana Diksha are mental acts. Kriya Diksha is given with the aid of homa and sacrifices. Kriya Diksha again subdivides itself into Bijam and Nirbijam. Diksha is from a root di meaning to shine. The original use of the word is in connection with the Soma sacrifice and meant the initiatory rite of consecration. In the days of the Mahabharata, the word had undergone a change consequent on the change of religious policy itself. It meant the initiatory rite of purification before the Chela is given the Upadesham. We quote the following passage from Mahabharata, Anushashana Parvam 85, wherein Lord Krishna himself describes how he got his Diksha from Upamanyu Maharishi, who recounts to him the glories of him who is the Lord of sacrifices and vows, and who gives him certain mantras, and asks him to recite them continuously. 8 days, O Bharata, passed there like an hour, all of us thus being occupied with talk on Mahadeva. I underwent the Diksha according to the due rites, at the hands of that Brahmana, Upamanyu. I received the staff from his hands. I underwent the prescribed shave. I took up a quantity of kuka blades in my hand. I wore rag for my vestments, I rubbed my person with ghee, I encircled a cord of munja grass round my loins. For 1 month I lived on fruits, the 2nd month I subsisted upon water, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th months I passed living upon air alone. I stood all the while supporting myself on 1 foot, and my arms also raised upwards, and foregoing sleep the while. I then beheld, O Bharata, in the firmament an effulgence, O son of Pandu. I saw a cloud, looking like a mass of blue hills, adorned with rows of cranes, embellished with many a grand rainbow, with flashes of lightning, and the thunder fire looking like eyes set on it. Within that cloud was the puissant Mahadeva himself, of dazzling splendor, accompanied by his spouse Uma. Our readers will recall the famous pose of Arjuna in his tapas at Kailasha as represented in the Seven Pagoda. And it is our contention that in the Mahabharata days the Agama rites had replaced or were replacing the old sacrificial rites of the Vedas, and modern India differs very little from the days of this period but for the rise of the new sects. And the Shaivites all over India, forming nearly 90% of the population, retain the same traditions, and the initiatory rites of Shaivas of today are all called Diksha, accompanied formally by Homa and Yajna, the various forms of which are discussed in the next stanzas. Nirbija Diksha defined. Nirbija Diksha is what can be given to children, to the very young and very old people, and to women and worldly men, and the sick. They need not perform the rites appropriate to the Diksha, and are taught to perform the daily rites as far as possible. These belong to the class of Niradikara initiates. Of the 3 kinds of Diksha, Samaya and Vishesa are of 1 kind each. Nirvana Diksha is of 2 kinds, Satyo Nirvana, which leads one at once into moksha, and Asatyo Nirvana, which leads him only after the parting with the body. The division here is into what is called Samaya, Visesha, and Nirvana Diksha. Those who are entitled to Samaya Diksha are those in the Dasa Marga. The Putramargis, Sahamargis, are entitled to Vishesha Diksha, and Jnana Margis to Nirvana Diksha, the various forms of Sabija Diksha. To the highly advanced in learning and character is granted the excellent Sabija Diksha. They are taught Nitya, Naimitika, and Kamya duties, and become clothed with authority as Sathakas, Chelas, and Acharyas, and attain freedom. It is of 2 kinds, the Lokadharmini and Shivadharmini. The divisions Samaya, Vishesha, and Nirvana, and Abhisheka are included in Sabija and Nirbija. Nitya duties consist in bathing and ablutions, worship of God, and keeping up of the sacred fires, etc. Naimitika consists in consecrating images of God, in performing diksha, and imparting knowledge to disciples. Kamya consists in japam and puja with intent to acquire powers. Sadhakas are only entitled to perform nitya and kamya. The acharya can perform all the 3. Lokadharmini diksha is what can be given to a krihasta. Shivadharmini can only be granted to a Naishtika Brahmachari by a Naishtika Brahmachari. For further details, the reader is referred to the commentary of Jnana Prakashar. The purpose of Diksha is the purification of the Advas. Hara destroys the births of the 3 classes of people mentioned above by removing their mala, by purifying their advas by means of the kriya or jnana diksha. The pure advas paths are 6 in number, namely mantra, pada, varna, bhuvana, tattva, and kala. Of these the lower one is pervaded by the one above, in the above-mentioned order. The last, kala, is pervaded by shakti, and shakti's place is in shivam. The advas as manifested by the nivriti and pratishta kalas. The first 5 advas are pervaded by the 5 kalas. In the nivriti kala are mantras 2, pada 28, varna 1, bhuvana 108, tattva 1, namely earth, and its deity is Brahma. In Patishta Kala are mantras 2, Pada 21, Varna 24, Bhuvana 56, Tattvas 23, and its deity is Vishnu. The details of all these should be learnt from the commentaries. The Advas as manifested by Vidya and Shantikalas. In the Vidya Kala are mantras 2, Pada 20, Varna 16, Bhuvana 27, Tattvas 7, and its deity is the imperishable Rudra. In Shantikala are mantras 2, Pada 11, Varna 3, Bhuvana 18, and Tattvas 3, and its deity as Maheshvara. The Advas as manifested by Santyatita Kala. In the Santyatita Kala are mantras 3, Pada 1, Varna 16, Bhuvana 15, Tattvas 2, and its deity is Sadashiva. Hence the total number of mantras is 11, Pada 81, Varna 51, Bhuvana 224, Tattva 36, and Kala 5. How the different kinds of karma are destroyed by the Divine Guru. The karma performed by the souls by mind, speech, and body are destroyed by these being made to eat the fruits through their cause, the 6 advas. After the eating thereof, the anavamala is matured, and the souls reach a stage of sufficient development when God appears as the Guru and destroys the akamya karma so that it may not lead to future births, and also the anavamala. The sanchita karma is destroyed by the purification of the advas, and prarabdha by experience in the body, so that it follows that both sanchita and prarabdha karma can only be destroyed by man's own individual efforts, by purifying his faculties, advas, and by tasting the fruits of both good and evil. It is then that Jnanacharya appears and perfects him with his bare touch, by sundering the karma root and mala root, hence the importance of the purification of the advas. Adhikaranam 2. The various stages in one's religious evolution. One follows the alien religions, these enters the orthodox fold, and plods through the paths of smritis and various asramas and their duties, practices rare tapas and learns rare vidyas and masters the Vedas and understands the excellent Puranas and gets a clear knowledge of the truths. He will then reach the heights of the Shaiva Siddhanta, and after practicing Charya, Kriya, and Yoga, he will reach the foot of Shiva by means of jnana. Everyone must at one time or other, either in the present life or in the past, pass and have passed through these various phases of thought and action. At all times and in all ages and in all countries, there have been people who have had no thought except for themselves and their pleasures, who have denied any other existence but this, who have denied the existence of any soul or God, who have cared more for the letter of the law and the forms of religion than for the spirit, who have lost their head and heart in endless learning and vain disputations, and who mistake symbols for truth. The path of reaching truth is indeed difficult, but as men's capacities are varied, they cannot but remain in these conditions till their mind is opened out and liberated, and the really true and universal religion must recognize the necessity for all these stages and beliefs and provide for them. The paths of Charya, Kriya, Yoga, etc. open out only after reaching a truly developed religious and spiritual sentiment, and then most religious emotion is really distinct in kind from mere intellection, or prescription, or perception of certain bare truths, nitya nitya, vivekam, etc., and hence the latter should not be confounded with the above, and its place is very low in the scale of one's spiritual development. The different ends of different people. Some believe that the pleasures derived in the company of young and beautiful damsels is the highest mukti. Some others believe a residence in the different heavens as the highest mukti. Some others believe the annihilation of the 5 skandhas as the end. The mukti of some others is the becoming possessed of the 8 attributes. Of some others a condition analogous to stone, and others viveka, and others say that the becoming of the true form of God is the end. Our mukti is the reaching of the feet of God. Each belief and action is consequent on the particular ends in life, which each one gradually places before himself, and each one thinks his ideal is the best, and would not be convinced that it is not the best. As you stay in a mango grove, you will find different persons entering it with certain definite objects. Some come in to carry away the dropped fuel, and twigs and dead leaves. Others come in for the bunches of the leaves. Others come in to gather the fallen young raw fruit, and others again for the fully grown unripe fruits, and others go in for the fruits. Some have greater relish for the unripe fruits than for the ripe fruits, especially the taste gets peculiarly developed among pregnant women who will not be satisfied by the offer of the most tasty fruits, and some have a liking for fruits with a dash of sourness in it, and when people eat fruits, some think it sweet to bite and eat the fruit whole, some are particular how they clean it, and some would press the juice carefully and then alone taste it. There is no accounting for tastes, as we say, and each derives some pleasure and profit, no doubt, and yet any honest thinker cannot fail to see that there are various degrees of pleasure and profit, differing in quality and quantity. The 8 attributes of Jainism are Ananta Jnanam, Ananta Darshanam, Ananta Viryam, Ananta Shukam, Ananta Namam, Nirnamam, Nirgotram, Nirayushyam, Sakala Samyata Bhavam. In Kural, the definition of a universal religion. Religions and postulates and textbooks are various and conflict one with the other. It is asked which is the true religion, which the true postulate, and which the true book. That is the true religion, postulate, and book, which, not conflicting with this or that, everything within its own folds. Hence all these are comprised by the Vedas and Shiva-gamas, and these two latter are embedded under the sacred feet of Hara. No one can cavil at the definition herein given, though they may not agree with the position that Shiva Siddhanta is the supreme religion, and we confess to not having received a better definition. Elsewhere we have written on the historical and universal aspects of Shaivism, and we need only ask today why books like Sivagnana Bodham and Tayumanavar's poems are accepted by all the different schools as expressing their own truths. A distinguished Madhva friend of mine told me after he read through Sivagnana Bodham that he was mistaken in supposing that I was an Advaiti. A learned and zealous Sri Vaishnava scholar has written a key or microscope to the 12 slokas of the same book, and all followers of Shankara treat it only as one of their own books. The importance of Vedas and Agamas. As they expound all the truths, the Vedas and Agamas are called Mudalnul, revealed books. Their immeasurable meanings are given out duly by those who possess the grace of God. Others try to interpret them according to their own sense and found various schools. Smritis and Puranas and Kalashastras, etc., form Valinul, guidebooks. The Vedangas and Upangas form Sarbunul, aid books. Nothing contains any truth not contained in the Vedas and Agamas. We cannot find anything to say to those who would assert otherwise. Mudalnul is defined as the books revealed by the Supreme Being, devoid of all imperfections. Valinul as books agreeing with the Mudalnul in their conclusions, but varying, if necessary, in other details. Sarbunul, though following both the above, yet may contain variations and differences. What are Purvapaka and Siddhanta works? The only authoritative works are the Vedas and Shiva-gamas. All other books are derived from these. These two books are said to be eternal, as they are revealed by the perfect God. Of these, the Vedas are general, and meant for those of the world. The Agamas are special, and revealed for the benefit of the Shaktinipadas, and they contain truths not found in the Vedas, and the essential truths of the Vedanta. Hence all other books are Purvapaka works, and the Shiva-gamas alone are Siddhanta works. The goal of Siddhanta. In the Siddhanta, the Supreme Shiva has graciously revealed that he will make mature souls Jiva Muktas in one birth after removing their mala by bathing them in the ocean of jnana and making them drink of bliss and freeing them of all future births, will place them under his feet of final mukti. Yet how mad is the world in not believing these holy words and falling into sin and perdition by saying all sorts of things. The characteristics of the Supreme God. He is the Supreme Lord in whom all the intelligence, all power, and all beneficence is inherent. His omniscience is manifest by his revealed works, the Vedas and Agamas. His omnipotence is manifest by his granting the deserts of those who follow and don't follow his commands, as he removes their karma by making them eat their twin fruits. He is beneficent. We behold all these glories in our Lord Shiva. The very symbols of God Shiva show forth his glorious power as the author of creation, development, and regeneration, Tirabhavam, and bliss. The four margas of reaching God. The four paths of reaching God are Sanmarga, Sahamarga, Satputra and Dashamarga. These four margas are also called Jnana and Yoga, Kriya, and Charyapadas. They will respectively lead one to Sayujya, Sharupya, Shamipya, and Shalokamukti. The first kind of mukti attained by Jnana Marga is the final bliss, Paramukti. The rest are called Padamukti. Dashamarga explained. Washing and cleaning God's temples, culling flowers and making garlands for the adornment of God, founding flower gardens and lighting temples, and praising God and obeying the commands of God's devotees after bowing and humbly receiving their orders. All these are the duties of the Dashamarga, and those who work in this path will reach Shivaloka. Satputra Marga explained. Taking the fresh and fragrant flowers, Dupa and Deepa, Tirumanjana and Naivedya, and purifying in all the 5 different ways, and establishing God's symbol, and invoking God's presence therein as all intelligence and light, and worshipping the same in all love, and praying to God and praising him, and performing also Agnihotra, etc. All these comprise the duties of Kriya Marga. They who observe these duties daily will reach God's presence. Sahamarga explained. In Sahamarga, one has to control his senses, stop his breaths, and fix his mind, and explore the secrets of the 6 Adaras, and know their gods, and passing beyond into the regions of the bright Chandramandala. One has to drink deep of the Amirta filling his whole body and dwell fixedly on the supreme light. If one performs this yoga of 8 steps, his sins will fall off, and he will get the form of God himself. The 8 aspects of yoga are yama, niyama, ashama, pranayama, patyakara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Of these, the last 5 are only set forth in the text, and the first 3 are assumed. Yama consists of ahimsa, satyam, refraining from theft, chastity, mercifulness, devoid of deceitfulness, contentedness, courage, taking little food, and purity. Niyama consists in performing tapas and japam and vratam, believing in God and worshipping him, and reading and meditating on shastras, being cheerful, fearful of evil, and intelligent. The asanas are Svastikasana, Gomukasana, Padmasana, Virashana, Simhasana, Bhadrashana, Muktyashana, and Mayurashana. Sanmarga explained. In Sanmarga one studies all the various arts and sciences, and Vedas and Puranas, and the different religions, and after rating all other knowledge as low, he holds on to the truth of Tripadartha, and finding the path of reaching God Shiva, and realizing the non-distinction of Jnaturu, Jnana, and Jnaya, he becomes one with God. Such great men reach Shivam. Difference of Jnana and Karma Margas. Reading Jnana Shastras and teaching and explaining them to others, learning them from others, and pondering over their purport, these constitute Jnana worship, or yagna, and will lead one to the feet of the Lord. Pure karma, yagna, tapas yagna, japa yagna, and dhyana yagna are each one superior to the one below, and will only induce bhoga. Hence Jnana worship is alone pursued by all those who know the moksha marga. Difference between those who enter samadhi and those who do not. Listening to words of wisdom, meditating on them, clearly perceiving the truth, and samadhi are the 4 forms of jnana. Those who attain to samadhi attain moksha. Those who do not come up to the jnana stage become lords of the heavenly worlds and enjoy great bliss, and by the grace of God are reborn in good families, and by the grace of jnanacharya attain to samadhi and the feet of the Lord. Difference of Vedic and Agama Margas. Those who perform deeds of charity, karma yagnas, pilgrimages to holy waters, observe ashrama duties, and perform tapas, shantivratas, and karma yoga will attain to the highest worlds and will be reborn in no time. Those who perform yoga and kriya and charya will attain to pada mukti, and at the end of time, if they do not yet deserve God's grace, they will be reborn and will attain to Shiva by jnana marga. If they deserve God's grace, they will at once attain God's feet. The merit of gifts to Shiva Jnanis. Even if very slight gifts are made to Shiva Jnanis with endless bhakti, these will appear like mountains on earth, and the donors will be prevented from falling into the ocean of births, and will enjoy supreme happiness in the higher worlds, and to free themselves from pasham they will get one more holy birth, and will without taking a long time in going through charya, kriya, and yoga attain the stage of jnana, the lotus feet of the Lord. Supreme moksha is alone attainable by jnana. The Vedas, Agamas, and Puranas proclaim that by jnana alone is attainable moksha. And yet what can we say to those fools who assert otherwise? By ajnana is begotten bandha, attachment. By true jnana is attained freedom. As the darkness flies away before light, so jnana vanishes, and with it bandham, and freedom is attained. By jnana we do not mean the jnana proclaimed by all kinds of low dogmatists, but the knowledge and love of the one true God. The language of this stanza is plain. The highest bliss is alone attainable by the attainment of the highest jnana. The other margas, charya, kriya, and yoga, are only steps leading up to jnana. The first two margas are usually called bhakti margas by other schools, but the word bhakti is so vague in its acceptation that it is not taken here to mean a particular marga. The word is as loosely applied as the word jnana, and what is real bhakti and what is real jnana has to be determined. But as a matter of fact, bhakti, or love of God in any sense, is essential in all the four margas we have indicated above. It is love that guides the charyavan, kriyavan, and yogi, and jnani. Without this essential love, all their acts would only be bare hypocrisy. And jnana, or knowledge too, is implied in our bhavanas, in the lower margas, but this knowledge is more and more symbolic in the lower stages, and as we ascend in spiritual power and genuine love, it will become more and more real. The greatest fallacy underlies in contrasting bhakti and jnana. There is no contrast at all, but each one involves and implies the other. In social relations, whether as master and servant, parents and children, friends, lovers, and the loved, the relation will be unintelligible and a sham if mutual knowledge and love do not exist. And the more one knows the other, his or her goodness and love, the more he comes to love the other. Love is in fact the fruition of knowledge, and the highest jnana is when we do know and recognize how loving God is, how great his love is passing the love of master and parent and friend and lover, yes, passing the love of oneself. How? Saint Madhukavacharyar frequently addresses God as sweeter than his own mother, and what is more, Saint Apar says, "There is nobody who is more loving than myself, yet there is one more loving than myself. Though man sits still and takes his ease, God is at work on man. No means on moment unemployed to bless him if he can." Young. Or as St. Taimanavar puts it, "The witness who guards me with his loving grace, the one, the ocean of Narguna, who every wink of time is engaged in doing nothing but good to me." The fact is, we can know only and truly when we can fully realize God's inmost nature, that God is Shivam, God is love. The ignorant think God and love are different. None know that God and love are the same. When they know God and love are the same, then will they enter God as love. As it is the proud boast of Shaiva Siddhanta that it is a universal religion and philosophy at once, comprising all schools of philosophy and all kinds of bhakti and jnana margas, and yet differing from them all and not all, is at once a characteristic of the divine ideal of the Siddhantis, as of their religion. Thou art not aught in the universe, nor is there aught save thou. Who can know thee? Just as the crystal emits fire when brought before the sun, so when the divine Guru, out of the fullness of his grace, appears before me, there will beget the first stage of Sivagnanam. Then will he see Shivam and his own real self and the whole world in itself. Then will he perceive God as the smallest of the small and the greatest of the great and the soul of all souls. Bursting the veil of Maya, I gained the sight of pure jnana. Gaining, O truth, I saw myself and saw others. I saw everything in that condition. Lo, they who did not have sight of thee are men who did not know themselves. The result of the Guru's manifestation. When they are sufficiently developed and receive the highest grace of God, Satinipada, the wisdom thus heard is contemplated by the grace of the Guru, and desire the attainment of perfect Samadhi. They will have neither likes nor dislikes, but are absorbed in contemplation. They will treat a potsherd and gold at the same value. Like Jivamuktis, they will so unite with God that they will never leave God, and God will never leave them, and dwelling in Him they will perceive only God in everything. The process of union with God. By the grace of God, getting rid of the bonds of knowledge and ignorance, receiving in His intelligence the knowledge obtained by hearing, contemplating it in the right way in without the conjunction of the antakaranas and avashtas, if you melt yourself in God, then will the Supreme Shiva, who is inseparable from everything, appear to you separately, and in the third step as one and different from all the world, and as Niradhara. This is the famous stanza which both Saint Tayamanavar and the author of Shiva Bogasharam had made the subject of supreme praise. The whole world's knowledge in half a stanza he revealed. Oh, when shall I reach his golden feet? Saint Tayamanavar. God's Niradhara transparency is thus defined in Tirukalarupadiyar, uncreated, immanent in everything, and yet remaining separate from everything, and yet becoming one with that which becomes one with it. This is the Niradhara, the nature of the union. Good karma will lift one into higher births and worlds, bad karma into lower ones, as such sundering both by the wisdom obtained by the virtue of worshipping the sacred being, and without entering into future birth in this world and lower and higher worlds. The person who becomes a Jivan Mukta in this world does not care where the sun shines, and feels no want, and leaving his body, enters the fullness of Supreme God, and becomes one with that fullness, and all in all. Jnana Prakashar deals fully in his commentary on the different views regarding the nature of the union in moksha postulated by various schools. The nature of Jivan Muktas. They who attain to Jnana Samadhi have neither likes nor dislikes. They desire nothing. They have no religious observance and tapas, vratas and ashrama rules and dhyana. They have no change in their hearts. They care not for religious marks. They do not follow the lead of their bodily and mental senses. They are above gunas, and they have no ideals and no caste. They become like children and madmen and possessed persons, and they may delight in singing and dancing also. They require not the aids of place, time, and postures. They perform actions without any thought of the results. Their minds do not move like a swing. They never leave the feet of the Lord. In all their daily actions, in walking and sitting, in sleeping or waking, in eating or starving, in purity or impurity, in wealth or poverty, in pain or pleasure, in enjoyment or separation, in like or dislike, or in any other state which ordinarily causes change, a particular upasana to reach samadhi. If you have not yet reached this condition, then perceive the truth of everything being in God, and God being in everything, and control your internal senses, and practice what your Jnana Guru has graciously taught you, and reach God who is immanent in yourself. Reaching Him, your human faculties will all be converted into divine faculties. Try to realize the transcendent being even in your waking condition. Then also your Shivanbhuti will become Shivanbhuti. This is the famous Dahara Upasana set forth in most Upanishads. See page 108, volume 2 of the Siddhanta Dipika. The greatness of the Jivan Muktas. Those who can realize the Supreme Being, even in their waking condition, they are the saints who have attained the Sharva Nivriti, or absolute renunciation. And how are we to describe their greatness? They, even in this life, have freed themselves from all bonds, and obtaining Shivam, they become God themselves. Even if they rule and enjoy as crowned beings, they will have no attachment to this world. If one does not reach this samadhi, even if they get rid of all external bonds, he will enter birth and his mala will not be destroyed. The three anubhuti in moksha. Is there anubhuti in moksha? If you say that nothing can be perceived when we lose our senses, no, nothing can be perceived by those who have not seen the true. The immature virgin cannot understand what love is. When two lovers unite, their pleasure cannot be expressed in words. They alone can know. Those without the aid of God's grace cannot know themselves. If any such say they have perceived God with their ordinary senses, it is all a delusion. If they are possessed of God's grace, they can perceive themselves and God without perception. If they don't, their births will not cease, and the anava cannot be sundered. As nature avoids vacuum, so the soul cannot exist unless it be filled in by the world or God. So to get freed from the world, the only means is to get into the eternal bliss of God. If not so filled, the soul will again revert back and fall into the world. Such are the logical results which flow from the views of Buddhists and Mayavadis, and honest people like Mrs. Besant do not shirk from stating plainly such a consequence. To them, the concluding words of every Upanishad, "There is no return, there is no return," are mere comforting words. There is no end to births, and there is an ever-recurring necessity of samsara. But the true Advaita Siddhanti's position is different. He prefers to believe that the words of the Upanishad are true, and not empty words. He strengthens his position both by logic and experience. Saint Tiruvalluvar, not content with stating the position here taken by Saint Arulnandi once, states it twice. Desire the desire of him who is desireless. Desire his desire, so that desires may leave you. Knowing your true support, you leave your earthly support. Then will that ill that binds you leave you alone, fully destroyed. The Vedic texts. By meditating, the Muni goes to the source of all beings, the witness of all beyond all darkness. Kaivalya Upanishad. By churning with jnana alone does the wise man burn up the bond, pasha. Knowing the Deva, the Shining One, he is released from all bonds, pasha. Sveta Upanishad 1-8. Knowing him, Isa, they become immortal. When men should roll up the ether like a hide, then only without first knowing Shiva there could be an end of pain. Sveta Upanishad 6:20. The knower of Brahman reaches the Supreme. Knowing Shiva, he passes into peace forever. A man who has left all grief behind sees the majesty of the Lord, the Passionless, by the grace of the Creator. For further treatment of the subject, see the note on Nirvana. Adhikaranam 4. One means of getting freed. There is no return for the freed. Knowing that soul is like the crystal showing the colors of those in contact, and that it shows in itself all the actions of the internal and external senses, and knowing that such action of the senses are no part of himself, and distinguishing his own real beautiful self by the grace of God from the false colors of the senses, the seer of such truth will unite with the Lord, and will never after leave him, like the rushing waters of the river, breaking its banks and reaching the ocean, become one with it and can never more return. The author merely echoes the concluding words of the Upanishads when he says that there is no return for the freed soul, subject discussed by the Badarayana in his concluding sutras. Note the use of which our saint has made of the analogy of the rivers and the ocean, and the absurd use of it made by Professor Deussen. The rough and discolored diamond of crystal or muddy and discolored water stands for the soul, and the roughness and discoloration and rust stand for the malas eternally attached to them. But it is possible to get freed from this dirt and discoloration by polishing and rubbing and filtering, process of births and deaths. The rough diamond can be made smooth and clear, and the muddy water can be made crystalline. What is the result? The light that was not seen before is seen now and enjoyed, and it is for this light alone that we prize the diamond, so much so that we call them brilliants. But is this light and brilliance its own? Where was it when it was covered by dust? Where is it when the brightest diamond is kept in darkness? The fact is, the light is not its own. It comes from another source. It enters it, and penetrates it, and covers it so fully that the crystal is indistinguishable from it. When the diamond is covered by the dirt, etc., the dirt, etc., prevented the light from entering it. When it was in darkness, no light was in union. So in Banda, our Maya and Mala prevent us from seeing the light. The light will enter us more and more, the more and more we get freed from this dirt, till at last the Jivan Mukta becomes all light and all God. The fatal fallacy committed by Mayavadis is in taking the reflected light as Jiva or Jivatma. It is not Jiva. The Jiva is the crystal or water. They say the reflection or light is God, and this is quite correct. The identifying of Jiva with God will be like identifying water or crystal with light, but in moksha we still reach a process of identification as when we name a diamond as brilliant. So indeed the Advaita Siddhanta always declare that the freed Jiva is Shiva. What occurs is the individuality of the crystal or water or the river is lost, and what is actually perceived is the light or God. In moksha there is feeling and there is perception of God, but there is no consciousness of such feeling or perception. When consciousness enters, there will be duality. When there is no consciousness, there is absolute oneness or Advaita. The following is pure language of science and is equally applicable to the case before us. When a river enters the sea, it soon loses its individuality. It becomes merged in the body of the ocean. When it loses its current, and where therefore it has no power to keep in suspension the sediment which it had brought down from the higher lands, the story of a piece of coal, page 42, Nunes, when the individuality, the feeling of I and mine, ahankara or anava is lost, the soul merges in God, and becomes indistinguishable. The karmic force is lost, and it cannot revert back, Devaram, and becomes incapable of sinning, and cannot leave the feet of the Lord. See further note to chapter 6, Light of Grace. The nature of God's omnipresence. If God is everywhere and everything, then there is no necessity for our reaching him. If he is not everywhere, then he is not God. His connection is like that of the soul and the body. The eye can see, but not the other parts of the body, though the soul pervades them all. The soul can see, but not various tattvas in union with him. By the grace of the Lord alone will he attain to the patijnana. Then will he be like the blind man, who gets his eyesight restored to him and perceives God as the light of light. To get freed from Vashanamala. Just as when you drop a stone into a pond covered with moss, the waters get cleared for a while and covered again. The mala, maya, and karma will become detached from the man when he is attached to God. They become attached to him again otherwise. Those who dwell on the feet of the Lord with love and steadfastness will never lose their samadhi. To those who cannot always fix their minds on God, we will give another means whereby they can cut their bonds asunder. Suttaram 9. Purification of the Soul. Adinakarana 1. Meditate on the Sri Panchakara. Him who cannot be understood by the Pashu and Pashajnana, if you cannot reach, not possessing sufficient patijnana and love in your heart, and are separated from his divine foot, you can reach him if you regard the alluring world as a mirage and get free from its clutches. If you again meditate constantly according to law on the Sri Panchakara, the Supreme will graciously enter your heart, driving away your darkness. Pasha and Pashujnana defined. Pashujnanam consists of the knowledge of the Vedas, Shastras, Smrtis, Puranas, and arts, and of the mantras from Asabai, Vaikari to Nada. When the soul realizes that he is above all these tattvas, he thinks that he is Brahma. His knowledge is Pashujnanam. But he cannot be the equal of Brahma, as he is bound in a body, and has to learn and know, and one by one. The Supreme Shiva knows alone without extraneous aid. Extinction of senses is no moksha. If you hold that the extinction of the senses is alone mukti, then we may as well hold that the eggs of fishes and fowls and seeds and persons dead and in a swoon, in sleep and in yoga, and while bitten by a serpent are all in mukti condition. If you would compare the samadhi condition to the condition of light when one's shadow gradually lessens and disappears under one at noon, even then the darkness will not vanish, and this jnanam is also pasha jnanam. Know then without knowing the feet of him who burnt the Tripura, and then you will burn your faults away. In the latter case, no account is taken of the jnana surya, and hence there will be no removal of darkness. The necessity for divine grace. Why we say that God can be reached only by the aid of his foot, wisdom, is because we can never be attached by our human speech, thought, or action, because his feet is because he can never be reached by our human speech, thought, or action, because his feet represent wisdom, the light of his wisdom, and it is by the aid of the grace of his feet the soul is freed from the doubt whether he is one with his bodily organs or senses, and is shown his real self. How God manifests himself. The eye that sees all cannot see itself, nor the internal sense that guides it. These internal senses cannot know themselves, nor the soul. The soul itself, which enjoys, cannot know itself, nor one who is the soul of his soul. Hence Shiva, the all-seer, manifests himself to the soul and shows him his own self, and though unseen by the senses, stands as the eye of all. If you know him thus, and see him in your heart, and join his foot, the pasha will drop off. Even if the pasha joins you, stand fast in his foot. Adinakaranam 2. How bliss is conferred. If one stands steadfast in the path, leaving the acquisition of the 8 attributes and 8 powers, siddhis, alone, etc., the worlds of Brahma and other gods, and passing the bonds of the 6 advas, and rejects all those as the veriest lie, then will he who has neither ups nor downs, who has no limiting qualities and is not conceivable by any person, who has no desires of his own, enter your heart himself, filling it with boundless love, and bless you with the rarest joy. Adhikaranam 3. The true explanation of Tattvamasi. Seeing ourselves different from the seen world and from the unseen God, and loving him in all humility, and from his intimate connection with us, if we meditate that I am he, then will he appear to us as one with us, as the poison leaves one by the snake charmer's meditation of Garuda, so will our sins fall off and purity be attained. This is the reason why the old Vedas teach us to practice the mantra I am he, Soham, Sa-aham, meaning he. Hamsa is another form of it, Aham Sa. This Soham is regarded as a mantra based on the Mahavakyas for practice or bhavana or sadhana, and not for proof. The principle is based on that formulated by Western psychologists to the effect that by practice, and in some mental disorders the idea itself becomes an actuality. The principle enunciated by Saint Mikanda is the soul or mind becomes that with which it identifies itself. It becomes pure matter, body, when it identifies itself as body, and when it identifies itself as param, it becomes the param. Oh, for the day when I shall become one Advaita with the everlasting truth and wisdom as I am one Advaita with Anava. The Panchakshara. Knowing in light of Sri Panchakshara his subordination to God, and seeing his form also in the Panchakshara, and doing Angakara Nyasa, touching the parts of the body with the hand with the Panchakshara, and worshipping God in the heart, performing Homa in the navel and Dhyana in the frontal brow with Panchakshara, and pronouncing the Panchakshara according to law, the Lord will appear to the soul even as the invisible planets Ragu and Ketu appear in the eclipse of the sun and the moon. The mysteries and the details of this have to be learned through the Guru. Worshipping in the heart. As regards the lotus of the heart, its root is the navel, its stalk are the tattvas from the earth, its calyx is the mohini, or lower Maya. The 8 petals are the Shuddhavidya. The markings in these petals are the 8 aksharas. The stamens are the Ishvara. Sadashiva and their Shaktis. The pistil and ovary is the Shakti Tattva, and above this Shakti is seated the Supreme Shiva, and worship him knowing this supreme condition. The effect of this internal worship. This internal worship, or yagna, is regarded as mukti sadhana because it purifies the soul, using sandal, flowers, dupa and deepa, and manjana, and food, with esoteric meaning and worshipping him in the heart, as one thinks and thinks of him with jnana. He will gradually enter your heart, as does the light when the lotus is cleared and cleansed, then the impurities will all disappear. The sandal symbol symbolizes vairagya, flowers and 8 external virtues such as abstaining from killing, etc., being the control of the external senses. Dupa, incense, is pride, which has to be offered up. Deepa, light, is one's intelligence. The Tiramajana, water, is contentedness. Food is one's egoism. Another means external worship. If one desires to worship God externally, let him take the flowers fallen under the tree and worship and praise the Supreme Shiva in some visible symbol in the same manner as in internal worship. Let him be resigned, thinking that he himself is not responsible for good and evil, and let him see God in everything without making distinction of internal or external worship. This will constitute the great merit of superior bhaktas. The effect of such worship. God will show his grace removing one's mala if one worships and sees God present everywhere, as fire in wood, ghee in milk, juice in fruit, and oil in seeds. Such worship will dispose God to enter his heart and remove his mala and convert him into his own form, and dwell in him in all his glory, just as the iron is converted into the form of the fire itself. Payanil, Suttaram 10, Pasachaya. Adhikaranam 1. Why a kamya karma cannot affect the jiva mukta. The good or evil which is done to him will rebound only on those who do good or evil to him. His faults will vanish when, by Soham relation, he becomes one with God, and dedicates all acts to Hara, and stands fixed in this portion. And God also will hold all his acts as his own, and everything done to him as done to himself, and will remain united to him, driving away his faults. The greatest sins, when committed in this condition of all love, will only be good service, and not otherwise. Because the Jivan Mukta is devoid of the feeling of I and mine. As he burns away by the fire of his wisdom the feeling of I and mine, that I did this, others did that, and stands steadfast in the path that Sat manifests himself to him, and drives away his karma. To him who retains this feeling of self, God is non-apparent, and he eats the fruit of his karma, and the karma will induce other births. Unless again he possesses the Shiva Jnana, he cannot drive away the feeling of I and mine. Adhikaranam 2. Away when he is again constrained by his senses. Know well that though these senses are united to you, yet they are not controlled by you, and that they do so by the command of the Supreme Controller. Worship the feet of him who owns you and the senses. Burn these passions by the grace of God, and be still, and even then, if you are led astray, be resigned that you have nothing to do, and that it is the result of God's agna. Then the akamya karma will not be generated, and you will not be born again. Greatness of God's beneficence and Shivarpana. God is not partial, he makes each one reap his own deserts according as he performs good or evil out of his feeling of self. When one loses his self, then God guards him from the contact of all karma. Such people say, O Lord, all our acts are after thy will. Thou dwellest in us and doth actuate our acts, and dost actually perform them too. I have no will of my own. Thy will alone shall prevail. From such people all karma will flee away from itself. The greatness of Shiva Jnana. Pilgrimage to distant lands, dwelling in forests and caves, starving oneself, prolonging one's life indefinitely, all these will be of no use if they don't possess pure wisdom, and they will be lost again. When they possess this Sivagnana, then even those seen sporting with damsels very fair, decked in fragrant flowers, their heart will be embedded in the feet of the blessed Lord, and will rest in bliss. The idea is beautifully expanded by Saint Tayamanavar in the following stanza. While I live in shady groves fragrant with fresh blown flowers, while I drink cool and limpid water and disport myself therein, while I find enjoyment in sandal-scented breezes which move through the court-like gentle maids, while I revel in the day-like light of the glorious full moon, while I feast on dishes of various flavors seeming tempered with ambrosia, while I am passing off into sleep after much merriment, bedecked with garlands and perfumed with scent, grant to me, O Shiva, who art true, spiritual and blessed, all-filling, impartite and substrat of all, grant to me the boon of never forgetting thy grace, so as to avoid the perils of worldly enjoyment. The principle illustrated. The fire will not burn him who is versed in Agnistamba. The poison will not hurt him who is skilled in medicines and mantras. The good and evil will not attach to the jnanis even though they may perform all kinds of acts. The pot smells for a time even after the asafoetida is removed, and the wheel turns round for a time after the potter has removed his hands, but produce effects similarly. The effects of past karma, the Vajanamala, may work but will not affect the Jivanmukta. All will vanish with his body. Be still, losing speech, said he. O mother, I know not its meaning. Saint Arunagiri Nathar. Be silent to the Lord and wait patiently for him. Truly my soul is silent to the Lord. The original sutra in Shivajnana Bodham is as follows. The highest injunction is to stand still and do God's will, and become one with him. Unless this stage is reached, his sins cannot leave him. Unless the soul merges its individuality or egoism or will in the person of the universal will, karma cannot cease, and births will result. So long as there is the play of his own egoism, the superior light cannot act on it. The pure glass is darkened by the dross of individual will, and unless this is removed, the full blaze of the Shining One cannot illuminate it and convert it into itself. All actions are not prohibited, but even the most virtuous acts, unless dedicated to God and done as following his will have their effects, and any act that he may do, even the most heinous one, if done out of obedience to God's will, ceases to be such, and even the human law exempts lunatics and children, as the acts are not done by their will, but by some will outside themselves. This highest doctrine of Hinduism is what is stigmatized as the doctrine of quietism and grossly misunderstood by our own people and by the Westerns. The doctrine is so high and subtle that it is plain it cannot be understood by the ordinary Lokagata rolling in purely mundane efforts and enjoyments. Neither can it be understood by people who cannot understand Christ's precious teaching to show the enemy your other cheek, though they repeat in their daily prayers, Thy will be done. That this highest Advaita doctrine is also the highest teaching of Christ can be easily shown. Christ leads his believers to regard him and God as their master and their Lord in the beginning, and slowly is reached the doctrine that God is our Father and we are all his children. But when he is nearing his end, he draws his disciples closer to him and tells them they shall henceforth not be called his servants, but that they are his friends. St. John 14:13 and 14. And yet a closer union is taught, a union quite indistinguishable from the Advaita union postulated by St. Makandar, a union which is complete in itself, yet in which the soul is strictly subordinate. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye except ye abide in me. I am the vine, and ye are the branches. Ye that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me ye can do nothing. If a man abideth not in me, he is cast forth as a branch, and is withered, and men gather them, and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. St. John 14:4-6. And after giving his disciples a final injunction to love one another, of 12th Sutra, Christ prays to God, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, I in them, and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in me. St. John 17:22-23. On that day ye shall know that I am in my Father, and ye in me, and I in you. St. John 14:20, which recalls the famous lines in the sacred utterances of St. Manikavachar. The mistress dwells in midmost of thyself, within the mistress centre dwellest thou, midst of thy servant if ye both do dwell, to me thy servant ever give the grace, amidst thy lowliest servants to abide, our primal Lord, whose being knows no end, while dwellest in the sacred golden porch, still present to fulfill my heart's content, from the translation of Dr. G. U. Pope. The original Tamil word is very expressive. It means complete possession and ownership of the other, so that the other is indistinguishable from owner, and Christ stands for this, who is all love, whose love to us is all-absorbing and more than a father's and mother's, and which permeates us through and through, if only we will allow ourselves to be influenced by this love, without interposing our own will and egoism, and this highest and inner teaching of Jesus Christ is hardly realized by the ordinary Christian churchgoer, and the Reverend Andrew Murray fears that there are many earnest followers of Jesus from whom the meaning of this teaching, with the blessed experience it promises, is very much hidden. While trusting in their Savior for pardon and for help, and reaching to some extent to obey Him, they have hardly realized to what closeness of union, to what intimacy of fellowship, to what wondrous oneness of life and interest He invited them when He said, "Abide in me," and this is not only an unspeakable loss to themselves, but the Church and the world suffer in what they lose. He attributes this to ignorance, and ignorance in the Orthodox Church, and failure on their part to preach this higher doctrine, and he is confident that if the Orthodox Church preached this with the same distinctness and instancy as the doctrine of atonement and pardon through his blood is preached, that many would be found to accept with gladness the invitation to such a life, and that its influence would be manifest in their experience of the purity and the power, the love and the joy, the fruit-bearing and all the blessedness which the Savior connected with abiding in Him. These references are from his preface to his beautiful work entitled Abide in Me, and the whole book is a commentary and exposition of the text Abide in Me from St. John. The whole book should be read to know how much meaning is in these simple words, but the table of contents will give an idea of the same. All ye who have come to Him, and ye shall find rest to your souls, trusting Him to keep you as the branch in the vine. As you come to Him by faith, God Himself has united you to Him, as your wisdom, as your righteousness, as your sanctification, as your redemption. This crucified one, God Himself will establish you in Him every moment, day by day, at this moment, forsaking all for Him, through the Holy Spirit, in stillness of soul, in afflictions and trial, that you may bear much fruit. So will you have power in prayer and in His love, as Christ in the Father, obeying His commandments, that your joy may be full, and in love to the brethren, that you may not give, as your strength, and not in self, as the surety of the covenant, the glorified one. And it is seen how far these approximate to the thoughts and their order as given out by our acharyas. The way to peace and rest does not lie in our seeking and desiring for it. The secret of perfect rest is in entire surrender to God, giving up one's whole life to Him, for Him alone to rule and order it, taking up His yoke and submitting to be led and taught to learn of Him, abiding in Him to be and do only what He wills. These are the conditions of discipleship. page 19, union with himself, and so with the Father is his highest object, page 20. O yield yourself this very day to the blessed Saviour in the surrender of the one thing he asks of you. Give up yourself to abide in him. He himself will work it in you. You can trust him to keep you trusting and abiding. Page 29. Only abide in me. Thou art weak, but I am strong. Thou art poor, but I am rich. Only abide in me. Yield thyself wholly to my teaching and rule. Simply trust my love, my grace, my promises. Only believe. I am wholly thine. I am the vine. Thou art branch. Abide in me. Page 34. In the lesson for the 11th day, the text from Galatians is quoted, I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me, brings out the force of the texts, etc., quoted above. The I dies, and yet not the soul, and yet the soul is not seen, is not conscious of its existence. What alone subsists and is felt and is enjoyed is the one God, the entire surrender of all self-will, the feeling of I and mine, the complete denial to the flesh of its every desire and pleasure, the perfect separation from the world in all its ways of thinking and acting, the losing and hating of one's life, the giving up of self and its interests for the sake of others. This is the disposition which marks him who has taken up Christ's cross, who seeks to say, I am crucified with Christ, I abide in Christ, the crucified one. When he, his spouse, whose eyes shine bright, mixed with my soul, and me, his deeds and environments died out upon this earth, confusion died, and all other memories ceased. How all my doings died, sing we and beat Telenam. Though ether, wind, fire, water, earth should fail, his constant being fails not, knows no weariness. In him my body, life, and thought, and mind were merged. How all myself was lost, sing we and beat Telanam. Tiruvachaka, refuge in God.